Hello, Michal Hucko here and welcome to another lecture of our REST API class. In this lecture, we're gonna talk about HTTP protocol. This lecture is a follow-up lecture for the previous one, where we were talking about how the internet works. In the previous lecture, I was just briefly touching something which is called a 7-layer OC model, on which the whole internet is currently built. I was mentioning there are some 7 layers and we were talking about IP addresses and how the IP address is being resolved from your domain when you are writing something in your search bar in your Google Chrome. At the end of the video, we were talking about the toppest layer of the 7-layer OC model, and this layer is called the application layer. We were talking there about the HTTP protocol. I was mentioning that there is a HTTP version and HTTPS version, which is a secure one, and you should be looking for the secure one whenever you are like working from your Google Chrome with some sensitive data about yourself. For the rest of this tutorial, we're gonna be mostly working with the HTTP, but you don't need to worry. Maybe later I will produce some lecture on how you should deploy your solution as an HTTPS. If you don't understand it right now, don't worry, I will explain everything. In this video, we're gonna look into details of the HTTP protocol. So as I mentioned, the HTTP protocol is at the top layer of the OC model. And it's a consensus, which like humankind agreed on how we're gonna communicate with the servers. Okay, so as I mentioned, there are also some different protocols, but this one is most used. The whole internet, in general, is working on the model which is called the client-server communication. So your client or your web browser, in most of the cases, is communicating with some remote server through the HTTP protocol. So the whole communication can be compared to a letter communication when you are using post. So post office communication, right? When you want to write to someone, you need to have a letter and then you need to put it into the envelope. And on the top of the envelope, you need to specify the name, the address, and all the necessary fields. So as you can see, this post office communication is somehow a standard 2 or a protocol 2. So you have some rules specified which you need to obey in order to be able to communicate with someone else further away. So what are the rules for the HTTP protocol? This is exactly what the video is about today. So when you want to communicate with the server from your client, you are sending to the server something which is called an HTTP request. And this HTTP request consists of 3 main fields or 3 essential fields. The first one, the very top one, you can think of it like it's ordered from top to the bottom, right? I'm always thinking of it as a letter, right? With some data, some text. So the top one, the first one is the request line. And then you have the headers, and under the headers, you have the body. A request line is always essential. It has to be there, right? You must put it there, and there is no option to send the request without the request line. Then you have some headers, which is like further describing the whole request. We will talk about the headers in more details in the future lectures, so you don't need to worry if right now headers makes no sense to you. But then in the request, you have the body. And you can think of a body as a letter itself inside the envelope when you are using the post office communication. So then when you send the request to the server is replying to you with the HTTP response. And the HTTP response is very similar, okay? It has a very similar structure, but instead of the request line, the first line, there is a status line or status code line, right? So this status line is saying, what is the response for your request? We'll talk more details about this today in this video. Then you have again headers. So you have headers for the response and also for the request. Most of the time, those 2 headers are different for the request and for the response with this request. And then you have the body, and inside the body is the response itself from the server, right? Again, you can think of it as a letter in the envelope. Now let's talk about the request line from the request part in more details. So what is this request line? This request line consists of 3 main fields. The first part is the method, the HTTP method. We're gonna talk about the methods in more details shortly. Then after the method part is the URI part, so URI part. In the previous video, I was talking about the difference between URI and the URL. So the URL is a subset of URI. But in most cases, people are using here the URL, and you can think of it as a URL. So in the previous video, I was talking about www.google.com. And when you are like calling this URL, you are specifying what resource, what document you want to retrieve from the server. So this URL or URI in this case is for detailed specification of the resource or the information which you are interested in as a client from the server. Right? So you put the full location here. And this URI in most cases consists of the path. You can think of it as a path in the, in your file system. And then a concrete file or concrete resource which you are interested in. We will talk more closely about this URI and URL in details in later videos, because this is an essential part to understand the REST APIs and how the REST APIs work. Okay, you don't need to worry if you don't understand it now. The third part of the request line is the HTTP version, and an HTTP version is just saying what version of the protocol are you currently using. And as the time progresses, people are upgrading software, right? Also, the HTTP protocol is being updated. Now, most of the time, you will see their version 1.1 or 2, right? But currently, there are also different versions. Like, for example, 3. I think Google is working on the version 3 if it's not released already, right? But basically, this version doesn't mean anything for you currently because you are a beginner and you are learning new things, so you don't need to worry about the HTTP version. But if you will be reading about it on the internet, now you know what is it about, right? It's part of the request, and then also the response, you will see it shortly. Now, talking about the HTTP methods. HTTP methods are essential with the REST, APIs. So we have a lot of methods. With the method, you are just saying what do you want from the server? What action from the server do you want? With the REST, there will be 4 main methods mainly connected. The first one is the get method. When you specify in the request line a get method, you are saying to the server that you want some data from the server. So please get me this kind of data which you are specifying with the path in the URI. Then you can put there a post method. Post method means you want to post something into the server. So maybe the server is responsible for writing data into the database, right? Let's say there is a PostgreSQL database behind the scenes. So you need to say like, please take this data from the client. You are sending the data through the HTTP request, and you are saying, please post or save the data into the database to the server. So that's the post method. Then there is a put method. Okay, that's the third one. The put method is there for updating data. So you are saying like, imagine you have a Facebook and you have there your profile photo. And now you want to say like, please, you're talking to Facebook server. Please change my profile photo with this one, which you are sending in the body of the HTTP request. And you are saying like, please put it into the database or change my profile. Yeah. So sometimes post and put can be confusing, but you should remember that like post, you are creating new data, and put, you are changing the data. There is also a patch method, but we won't talk about the patch method too much, but just keep in mind there is a patch method which is somehow an alternative to the put method. I don't want to right now describe the differences because it's quite hard to comprehend. So that's the put method. And there is also a delete method. The delete method is also essential. So get, post, put, and delete. The delete method is there for deleting some data on the server side. You are saying the server, please delete something somewhere, okay? Specified by the URI and the body of the request. So get, post, put, delete. Okay, you should know these methods anytime. Those are essential for the rest and for the rest of your backend development career. Okay, so that was the HTTP request. Let's talk about the HTTP response. As HTTP request has the first line, which is the request line. The HTTP response has the status line, which is closely connected with the HTTP response. And now let's look closely to the status line. The status line again consists of 3 parts. In this case, the first is the HTTP protocol version. So in this case, again, HTTP 1.1 or something else. Then there is a status code, and then there is a reason phrase. So status code and reason phrase are closely connected together. And status code and reason phrase is a way how the server responds to your request, saying you just briefly whether he accepted the request or not. Okay. So you can think of these 2 things as like saying you like, yes, I did it. And here is the response in case of get. Or yes, I created the record in case of post. Or yes, I updated the record in case of put. Or yes, I deleted something in case of delete. Okay, so this status code is just a numerical way how we can express the action which was taken on your request from the server side. Now let's talk about the reason phrase. The reason phrase is many times connected with the status code. Okay, so for every status code combination, there is a dedicated reason phrase. Like it's a human form of saying like what happened on the server side, right? But many times you can think of it, it's very like obsolete and you don't need it there, right? Because the status code itself is expressing the thing, right? But many times you want to have some message for someone who is reading your response. Now, one short topic here. I know that many times you were using the web browser and you went to some web page and suddenly you saw something like 404. It's one of the most popular status codes out there, right? It's saying there is some problem with your request, and you are trying to access something which is maybe non-accessible, right, for you. So that's an example of a status code. But now let's look closer to the status codes. Status codes are essential when you will be building the server side of the REST, communication. You need to know the status codes because your application will need to respond to any request it will take from the internet. So you need to understand what status code to use in which situation. So we split the status code into 5 main groups. Status codes are mostly, created from 3 numbers. So they are read as one number from 100 till 600, right? Somewhere in between. So the family of status codes can be split into 5 groups. First are the status codes starting with 1, so 100 something. These status codes are saying you that your request is in progress. You are doing okay, but your request is still in progress and you should continue with your request. It can be complicated to understand right now. For now, just 100 means like you are doing okay, but the request is in progress, something like that. I will shortly show you where you can find all the available status codes for you so you can check and learn them. The second group of status codes or family of status codes are status codes starting with the number 200 something. Those are the best status codes out there. They are saying you like you did something okay and your request was like processed. So these status codes are connected with the success. Then you have the family of 3, so 300 something. This means that your request is being redirected to maybe another server or is going somewhere else. So you are doing well, but your request is still not processed because it needs to be somewhere redirected. Then there are families of 400 and 500. These status codes are bad. They are saying you some kind of error. 400 status codes mean you are doing something wrong as a client. So you are accessing a wrong resource specified in the URI section or URL section. Now you know. We were talking about it last time, right? So you're trying to access a page which is maybe non-existing, right? So you go for Google and you put there google.com/Michal Hucko or something like that. Or you go for your custom page and you put there /something which is not programmed for your server and the server doesn't know how to respond. So he's saying like 400 something guy, you are doing something wrong. Then we have their status codes with from the family of 500 and these status codes are saying that there is something wrong with the server. So maybe you are accessing a correct resource, but your server is responding with a negative status code. So these status codes are saying like server is doing wrong, right? So maybe the server is broken or it has some issues. I'm expecting you have some experience from, programming, maybe with Python. That would be the best case scenario for you. And in the Python, you know that sometimes your code is failing. It's ending up with an exception, right? And this is normal case also for servers. Sometimes the servers have some error. During the runtime, you are processing some requests and suddenly the server has some error. And this is exactly the situation when the server would respond with 500 status code. Okay? So those were the status codes and those are part of the HTTP response. And now you know them. So this was the basic of the HTTP protocol. So it's based on the request and response model, based on the client-server communication, which is all around the world almost the same. We are talking about 4 main methods: get, put, post, and delete. Okay, get, post, put, and delete. Now, just to prove you that really this is happening behind the scenes, let's go back to my Google Chrome again. And now I'm going to show you how I'm going to make a request to some web page. So if I right click again and click on the inspect the same as last time and I go to the network console, so the network view, sorry, it's not a console. And now again, I triggered the same request, so google.com, we will see again the requests which are happening behind the scenes. And now look at these columns. There is a method part and you can see a lot of get requests are happening behind the scenes. And what more, you can also see the status codes for these get requests. So most of them are from the family 200 saying you that you did something good. So you are doing a good request. If you want to know what are all the status codes, you go to your Google search and you put there like HTTP status codes. You press enter and now go to the result which is on the web page https://developer.mozilla.org. This is the website where you can find most of the status codes for different families. So first they start with the status codes in the family of 100. So 100 means continue, and this is a description of the response from the server. Then if you go for the successful responses, you will see that those are with 200. So for example, 200 OK is the best status code you will see. And it's saying like the request has succeeded. The meaning of the success depends on the HTTP method. So in case of get, the resource has been fetched and it's transmitted in the message body. So we saw it with the google.com. The status code 200 or 201, 201, many times it's better to, spell it, pronounce it by numbers. So separate it, not like the whole number. So 201, you will maybe encounter this more often than 201, okay? It's saying like the request has been succeeded or has succeeded and the new resource has been created as a result. It's typically the response sent after post request, okay? But many times developers are lazy and they will just send 200, right? But 201 is good status code. Then when you scroll down, there are the redirect messages, client error responses, and then there is the server error responses. Fine. This web page is essential. Why? Because we're gonna implement the server and we want to know how to respond to a different request based on the situation. Please go through these status codes and try to remember some of them. You don't need to like remember all of them. Or at least this 200 is good to remember, or 404 not found. The web page has not been found, or 500, right? Just the basic one. Yep. And because anytime you will be programming something and you will be thinking, or what status code should I respond to for this request based on this situation, you can always reach out to this web page and see the status codes there, in case you are not doing some, job interview when they are expecting these status codes by heart. But yeah, that's not the case most of the time. Fine, so this was the HTTP protocol in this video. I hope you liked this video. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope I will see you in the next one.